Hey there, good morning and welcome back to the JeepSolid garage. So in this video today, we're going to be installing freeze plugs, core plugs, expansion plugs, whatever you want to call them, into our stroker build here. This is all part of a series where I'm taking this inline 6 engine, turning it into a stroker for my Jeep Wrangler. We're going to be talking about the difference between brass plugs and steel plugs, which one you should use and why, what's the difference. So let's get started. So as I mentioned, this is part of a stroker build that I'm doing. I plan on putting this into my 1994 Jeep Wrangler YJ. The machine shop, this is freshly back from the machine shop. I've got it all cleaned up. Did my final cleaning on it. Once you get it back from the machine shop, you got to do that. And then I've got the core plug recesses all cleaned up, ready for installation. So be sure to check out my other videos on how we got to this point and the surfaces prepped for the installation of these core plugs. And yes, they are core plugs. They're truly not freeze plugs or expansion plugs. They are there because of the casting process of the block so they can get the sand out. Sorry, I'm just kind of rustling with this because we need it on a good hard flat surface. We can't do this on the engine stand, and it'd be easier if I had help, but you gotta do what you gotta do. There we go. All right, now let's talk about the difference between steel plugs and brass plugs and what I'm going to be using in my stroker build and why. The biggest difference between the two is corrosion resistance. The brass plugs are much more resistant to the corrosion than the steel plugs. Here's a couple steel plugs that came out of an engine that was about 25 years old. There's some corrosion and rust on there, but honestly, they weren't leaking. I didn't have any trouble with them, but they are more likely to corrode than the brass plugs. And these core plug kits came out of my Engine Tech Master Rebuild Kit. Engine Tech is the sponsor of this video series on this stroker. Be sure to check out their website linked in the description below. Like I said, they gave me a Master Rebuild Kit that has almost everything I need in it for this stroker build. So be sure to check them out. So let's start installing these, and while I'm installing them, I've got another tip for you guys on how to further strengthen the seal on these so that you don't get any leaks. Now we're ready for the installation. If you haven't seen my video on prepping the final cleaning of this engine block and prepping the surfaces for the core plugs, go back and watch that video. I've got some good tips in there about how to clean it and get it ready for the installation. So to drive these new core plugs in, I'm going to be using the socket method. So here I've got a socket that fits just on the inside of that. We're going to place it there and use our little 5-pound sludge to drive it in straight. But before we do that, we're going to use a little bit of this Permatex Aviation Forma gasket. This is really good stuff at helping to prevent those leaks. Nothing worse than going through all this trouble. You put your engine back together, you start it up, and you got a little dribble coming out of one of these. That's just the worst feeling. This is part number 80019, Permatex Aviation Forma gasket. Get yourself a bottle of that. It'll be linked in the description below. All right, we are ready. Got my glasses on here, because I don't want any little bits of metal shooting up into my eyes. And now I have a socket that fits just on the inside of the brass plug there. Got my Aviation Forma gasket here. We're going to put just doesn't take much of this stuff. And if you've ever used it, boy, it has a great smell. A little strong. A fine coat of this. This will help us prevent any of those leaks. This is good stuff. If you're going through all the trouble of doing a rebuild or putting new freeze plugs in, core plugs, expansion plugs, whatever you want to call it, you may as well get yourself a little bit of that. Just a little assurance that you're not going to have any trouble. And I want to be able to hear when I'm older, so there we go. And once it's recessed just right, we're going to wipe off our excess gasket maker to make it look all pretty. All right, now let's go through and do these others. Then we'll hop over to the threaded plugs and talk about the installation of those and what we're going to do to prevent leaks on those as well. I'm really happy with how that looks. They're all in there nice and square. Let's move on now to these threaded plugs. And for these threaded plugs, we're just going to use a little bit of Teflon tape. You guys can watch me kind of fumble with this because I seem to always struggle with Teflon tape, not being able to wrap it smoothly. I want it this way. And sometimes I end up wrapping it the wrong direction. So you want to wrap it so that it doesn't bunch up on itself. Hey, there we go. That actually looks pretty good. I have the excess on the outside here. There we go. Perfect. So I've got a few more core plugs to get in here. The oil galley plug, oil galley. So be sure to subscribe though to follow along with this stroker build. This is gonna be a lot of fun. Can't wait to get it into my 94 YJ, having that power boost, that's gonna be awesome. So be sure to subscribe. Thank you guys so much for following along and have a good day. Oh.